continued education section of our program.
Okay, you have your licensees and registrants that came on board since your last meeting, or that closed out November and December. And we still continue to get a good number of trainee applications. We still had even more in January. So the numbers from new applicants continue to increase. Exhibit 8, we don't have any new AMCs as of right now. And then Exhibit 9 is your examination reports. The fail rate looks a little high for the first month there, and then 2 out of 3 passed, and the first time takers in the second month. So, again, the one thing that we are hearing nationally, I do believe there was a significant uptick in, I wish I had the number on top of my head, but the significant uptick in first-time test takers in 2018. So they are seeing more interest in the profession on a national level. And I think we would reflect that as well.
We're going to move on to other items, and I ask the question.
Yes, we have Mr. Leader, Frank Leader is the 2019 president of NCAB. He is asked to address the board in the open forum.
He's had
Yeah, I've got to turn my phone off. You know, I think I've only got music for the wife, which is probably the most important call you can get. Let's see. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, this morning I'd like to introduce myself. It works better when you turn it on. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yes, as Don mentioned, I've been talking with him recently, and I've known Don for some while. I am the 2019 president of North Carolina Real Estate Appraisers Association, NCREAA. And that's a mouthful of letters. It kind of doesn't really roll off your tongue very well. But yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a residential appraiser based in Fayetteville. I've been there since 1999, when I started as a trainee. But primarily I'm here today to offer to support, the board and offer to work with our organization and the board and staff and the other stakeholders, here in the state, because we all share a concern for, protecting the consumer and the folks that use real estate services here in North Carolina. The Real Estate Appraisers Association is in a particularly good position to be able to do this because we represent different facets of folks involved in that. Number one, consumers. We buy, sell, mortgage, real estate here in the state. So we're consumers. The folks in my group have also been elected to represent members of other appraisers across the state. And also, we're appraisers. We're out there on the front lines, day in, day out, doing the work, learning the job, performing the job, and working with consumers. So, that's it. Short and sweet. Not a big long speech. Well, I'm on to, just like I said, introduce myself. I know I've had a chance to talk with some of y'all and meet you individually already. But I'd like to get to know everyone and work with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, you want to get into the legislative issue?
Yes.
Okay. Region Ms. Willette's taking a witness stand, which is a little unusual for some reason.
It's our turn.
It's your turn. As you know, Roberta always has worked with us on our wording of the legislation, and this was well underway prior to her retirement. And so trying, as one of her projects, is to get the language ready to what we need to go to the General Assembly. As we know, last month you voted, or last meeting you voted to put forward the AQD criteria, and we'll have that draft language to you, but that is very much straightforward. The language today, I know there's a lot of anxiety in the room about what was actually put in there, and so just to be clear, we did have NCREAA and a couple others, individuals put forth some questions about what this actually means and why we're doing it. And so I've asked Roberta if she'll just address that issue in general. As you know, the language itself and what's being passed around now, as I told them, is a copy of the actual Title 11 changes, the minimum requirements for project management companies, so we can refer to that. But the language that's in front of you can be, we can tweak it if necessary, and certainly General Assembly can do with it what they want to. So that's, we do have that to come. But I wanted her, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about why it's even being put forward, and I just want her to kind of give you some background and take some questions.
Especially to take some questions for her. So what I put together, and as I said, we've been working on this for several months, were proposed statute changes regarding the AMC criteria that are necessary to come into compliance with Dodd-Frank federal law and the appraisal subcommittee's policy statements. And if you look at your exhibit on the first page, required changes to the statute, you'll find a change in paragraph C, where we currently talk about any state or federally chartered bank and so forth, and we've changed the language to financial institution or federally regulated appraisal management company. This statute was drafted before Dodd-Frank became final, and we always knew once Dodd-Frank became final that we were going to have to do some tweaks to it. One of the things that we waited for during this time period was obviously to get that language out there and for the appraisal subcommittee to come up with its own policy statements. Otherwise, some of these changes would have been made a few years ago. The first one, and I think the one that's raised the most concern, is currently our statute exempts any state or federally chartered bank from registration. The language that's proposed is now taken directly from Dodd-Frank and from Title 11 to refer to a financial institution or a federally regulated appraisal management company. What was passed out to you is taken from Title 11, and it specifically says an appraisal management company that is a subsidiary owned and controlled by a financial institution, regulated by a federal financial institution, regulatory agency shall not be required to register with the state. Those entities could require if they chose to do so, but they've never been required to under our law or under Dodd-Frank. When some concerns were raised by some of the organizations, we got in touch with our regulator, the appraisal subcommittee, and their attorneys to get their opinion on this as well. And now that I've pulled it out, we got an advisory from them stating that the AMC rule does allow states to have additional requirements beyond the AMC rule. But the state has no authority to register federally regulated AMCs, even though the state has to collect a federal registry fee from them. It goes on to state that federally regulated AMCs are regulated by the financial regulators and not the states. That the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the OCC will be investigating complaints against federally regulated AMCs. So we did reach out to get another legal opinion, make sure I'm not completely missing the ball here. And so the tweak to the statute is reflecting federal law. That is why the change, instead of saying state or federally chartered bank, it now refers to a financial institution and adds in the required language about federally regulated appraisal management companies. Definitions you see on page 2 were taken from federal law. I didn't make those up. They come from Dodd-Frank. What is a federally regulated appraisal management company? You have to be owned by an insured depository institution and regulated by one of the financial regulators. And again, the definition of financial institution, those come out of Dodd-Frank Title 11. The other changes in here on page 3 simply adds in that we can collect fees from those federally regulated appraisal management companies to put them on the National Registry. And on page 5, at the very end of prohibited acts, it's 2 paragraphs. You may remember that a year ago, we requested an extension in implementing the registration and supervision of appraisal management companies. We requested that from the appraisal subcommittee because we were supposed to have been in compliance last year. Our statute was not in compliance. We requested that the subcommittee grant us an extension. We specifically stated to them that we did not have these 2 paragraphs C and D. Those were the pieces that are out of compliance with the policy statements and with Dodd-Frank. And based on not having those 2 paragraphs, they gave us the extension. So that's why those paragraphs C and D are in there. Specifically, Dodd-Frank says no certified or licensed appraiser conducting and no appraisal management company procuring or facilitating an appraisal in connection with a consumer credit transaction secured by the principal dwelling. The consumer may have a direct or indirect interest, financial or otherwise, in the property or transaction involving the appraisal. So that's why these 2 paragraphs were added at the bottom. Now, I know there were several other things that this board has talked about over the past years, I should say, about possible tweaks to the AMC statute. The way that this has been drafted is these are the bare minimums that we need to require to comply with federal law. There's nothing in addition to that. So if there's any other changes to the AMC law that need to be done, I'll let the staff handle that part of it. I was in charge of making sure you were complying with federal law. And to me, this is what you need to comply with federal law. So I'm open to questions, if you have any. Doesn't sound like you do.
Well, I guess from my standpoint, the question is, other than the sections that apply to the collection of the fees and potentially those last 2 paragraphs for conflict of interest, is it a fair analysis that our current statute exceeds the requirements of the federal law?
I believe that the troubling information in our current statute is in the definition on page 1, paragraph C, where we say any state or federally chartered bank, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't comply with Dodd-Frank. That language does not, and that's why the change in the language using the specific terms financial institution or federally regulated appraisal management company. I think we exceed. We can't, according to our regulator, we cannot exempt a state chartered bank unless they meet the requirement of financial institution under Dodd-Frank.
How many AMCs in North Carolina are federally chartered?
I only know 2 in the country. There may be more, but that's what I know of.
And they are?
One would be Red Sky Risk Services, and I believe the other is the CDRES. Did I get the initials right? Right. And it's that they can choose to register if they want to. We cannot require them to.
That has been the long understanding that we've heard from Arrow and from all the negotiations and things that we've been dealing with over the last 2 or 3 years. Hearing some of the same stuff as a board member that you guys have been hearing in the last few days, and quite honestly, I got a lot of heartburn that we exempt we start exempting and setting up a separate class here, that we have potentially making it where if you're registering with the state, and if you're choosing to do that, and according to the way it has been explained to us at Arrow, that if you don't register with the state, then there is a problem in how and what business you can do in that state. Part of the question is, if they're exempted, are they not given basically reducing the competition between the ANCs working in this state? Because they're given an unfair advantage. They're not having to come under the same rules, per se, that we've had on the books for the past 8 years. So there is a legitimate question about giving an unfair advantage to these federally regulated institutions which are given the option. Do you want to participate in the state of North Carolina or North Dakota or any of these others? And they're given, we've been told over and over again for the past few years that you could not choose to be registered in that state, and if you're federally regulated, you can participate in those states that have no ANC statute per se. And in this case, it seems like that we're backtracking and we're setting up a second tier system that really concerns me. It's giving a particular group an unfair advantage. I've heard from some ANCs in this issue. They're really concerned about that. Because if someone like in, excuse me, in Mr. Life's position, if there's another bank that currently has the same situation, they can participate if they choose. But if they're coming out and deciding that, well, we have to register our folks to be qualified off the panel, if you will. But we don't have to subscribe to what the North Carolina state law is, and all of these other agencies are having to conform to this statute that North Carolina put in place 8 years ago. It just not only not being fair, I think that we're welcoming legal action in this case. And I have huge problems with it.
Well, just to be clear about it, what I've heard at Arrow is that I've had in the breakout sessions I've been in, discussions they talk about is that they have even asked the subcommittee or anybody else, is there a list of these so that we know who they are? And they have said it's up to that AMC to invoke this exemption. But every state has to deal with it. It's not us. We're not putting out something new. And the language from the attorney from the ASC couldn't be any more clear. The state has no authority to register federally regulated agencies. It's not that we or shouldn't we can. And so I think that's now, if the General Assembly wants to push back at them and say we think we can, then let's give them the chance to say that. But I as regulated by the subcommittee, I would like to, I don't want to go against what they say unless you can say get better clarification. I'm glad to do that. I just want to know, I don't want to go against their directive.
I'm a little bit confused because with what the subcommittee's telling us, because and I'm no attorney, and just looking through and doing some research, I did find a document, it's 12C FR Part 34, and in that it talks about the minimum requirements that is required. And in the minimum requirements, lists several items, register with the state, all AMCs have to register with the state, they have to make sure they have state licensed and certified appraisers, and a couple of other things. And then it says later in it that an AMC or subsidiary owned and controlled by an insured depository institution, which is what we're defining as a federally regulated. It says, based on basically, the regulatory agency is subject to all the minimum requirements except the requirement to register with us. But then the last line in the very next paragraph says states may establish requirements for agency registration and supervision that are in addition to these requirements. So I'm almost reading that as the minimum says
if you
we have to, but then we can't.
If you read that sentence, and if you look at what we handed out, sentence B is what you're referring to, 3353G, nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent states from establishing requirements in addition to any rules promulgated under subsection A. Subsection A is above B, and it has those four things. Then when you move to C, it moves to an appraisal management company that is a subsidiary owned and controlled by a financial institution regulated by a federal financial institution shall not be required to register with the state. That's not A, that's C. That's on top of. So there can be things added to those four items in A that any of our licensees would have to adhere to, but we can't make those people register.
So is this the right here that was handed out, is that federal law that trumps what this CFR is talking about? Because it doesn't say that we can't regulate them, it just says they're, by minimum standards, they don't have to be regulated.
The federal law trumps the CFR. The CFR is a rule.
Okay.
What I handed out to you is the law.
Okay.
And the law, if you look at Part C, it says requirements of subsection A shall apply. It does not say the requirements of subsection B shall apply. So B does not apply.
So in the real world, what we're saying is that if we were to get a complaint about a federally regulated AMC, we could not accept that complaint or deal with it.
Exactly. We can't now. It has to go to their federal regulator.
Well, I'm just going to be very honest, I'm going to say it plainly, and
Well, and let me backtrack. If they choose to register with us, yes, we can do something about that. If they don't choose to register with us, then it has to go to their federal regulator.
so we would not, if they don't register with us, they pay no fees to us.
Paying the fees only puts them on the national registry. There are requirements for federally regulated AMCs, but they're not ones that we enforce.
The registry fee, now, you're right, if they choose not to register with us, they don't pay the registration fee.
Okay.
The big fee, in other words.
So that means we're gonna be tasked with collecting the registry fee and having the staff and labor for that, and it's kinda gonna be on the backs of everybody that
In all
does have to pay
states,
registration.
and many states are in the same boat we are, they don't have anything that gives them a vehicle, to collect fees from a non-licensee. So you're having to put in some language that will allow them to.
The cost and the staffing falls on the people who are paying the fee.
That-
So the federally regulated will be getting the service without a fee.
And that was one of the original points, is if you do business in North Carolina, you're paying fees to North Carolina. That was something that was said a long time ago. I'll take a step beyond that, and may not be popular, but I have a problem because I feel like if there are only two in the United States currently registered, and one of them is one of our board members, I feel like it's a conflict for us to vote on this, period. It seems to benefit one of our board members, and that just, to me, is an ethical question. I don't see how we could do that. And how would the Ethics Commission look at that? I mean, if we voted on anything that benefits one member of this board, is that not an ethical issue?
Well, to start with, it doesn't benefit him because his company never had to register. And if you choose to register or not choose to register, that's the company's decision, but never had to register in the first place. So this, you know, any company could continue to choose to register. And, you know, I mean, quite simply, we can simply ask, do you feel that you can be fair and impartial in making a decision on this? And Sandra, you're better off asking those questions than I am.
Well, I mean, you are registered, your company is registered with this board. So there is now, do you, I guess the question is, do you feel you can be fair and impartial?
Now, I would like to address maybe some objective information again. Always felt like since my company is business in the state, I voluntarily registered because I felt it was the right thing to do. I never had to register, never had to in the past. We had clear, definitive. And also, again, for those in the audience, the one comment about it being an unfair advantage, I would trade in a heartbeat an FDIC examination for 3 weeks in a row of the cost and the time and the thoroughness. And I do hold this board in high esteem and its staff, but the quality of the exam I go through is nothing like this board can do or ever would do. Again, when you have the North Carolina Commissioner of Banks, along with the FDIC, every policy, every procedure, everything I do is questioned, and it is extremely detailed. And again, I'm just letting you know objective information. Again, you know, the FDIC does not release the results of those exams of banks unless there's a problem. But the scrutiny that I get, if anything, is 25-fold what any other agency would get. And again, it has always been my thought that had I not chosen, I still have to follow North Carolina appraisal law. I still don't have a choice of following. Again, the thought of any company, if there's a mistake made by a federally regulated agency, if they come down and shut down the bank because of it and impact their counter rate, it's completely different than the impact felt by any AMC. It's 25-fold in that. So again, I don't feel like I have an issue being biased. Again, I voluntarily have chosen to register in this state. So I feel I have. Again, I'm already registered.
Right. So the question is, you feel like you can be fair and impartial in this decision?
Yeah, again, because again, it's just, it's my thought we're just restating the law and cleaning it up based on the new regulation. Again, I didn't have to join before. I didn't have to register before. Nothing has changed in my mind. So I'm not sure what I'm voting on differently than the law that's already there.
Well, I just know from the past, just hearing from other appraisers who didn't know the process and when they file a complaint against an AMC, they may call the lender, the client, and say, you know, this happened or that happened, and the bank would say, sorry, you need to call the local appraisal board. So I'm thinking out loud. Are we now in a slippery slope where every AMC that will register federally, and we're moving to a point where we won't have any oversight over AMCs? Because that was the big issue. Do the banks regulate AMCs or do the appraisal boards? And clearly the decision was made that the local appraisal boards do. So I just,
Well, to start
I
with,
don't know if I'm being clear, but I just really.
well, I understand your concern, but the thing is that an AMC has to be owned and controlled by an insured depository institution. The AMC can't say, I am choosing to be federally regulated.
I know.
That's not going to happen. They have to be, part of one. That's why the definition of what you have to be. That's why it's in here. If you want to be a federally regulated appraisal management company, you have to meet the two tests in here. You have to be owned and controlled by an insured depository institution and regulated by one of these financial institutions. You can't just say, I'm now considering myself federally regulated.
Well, I understand, but we look at rails, past situation with rails, the other, I forget the names of them, somebody help me out here. And the issues we had there, because it appeared that they were not being regulated adequately by the FDIC.
but they chose to register with us.
That they don't have to, well, they don't come under this, federally regulated status because
No,
they're not,
Rust is, no.
because they're not owned by a lending institution.
Right.
And when this came down, the, at least the final reading that happened in 2015 concerning this issue, giving it to the states from the FDIC, they were leaning, even though they couldn't mention the names, they had two organizations on their minds, and that was the two that ends up being Park, Rails, and you're right, even the one that, Lansing, excuse me, thank you. And since that point, those two organizations, they have no option. If they want to do business, they've got to list as like every other state, or non-federally regulated AMC. And I share Mr. Gore's concern, but then again, at what point, folks like Mr. Reitzel and the other ones that have the option, all right? So they have the option of either signing up under the state, or as it has been our understanding, if they choose not to do that, they can operate in those states that have no federal, or have no other state AMCs, or have no policies concerning AMCs. But fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way we look at it, we put this thing in place in conjunction with Dodd-Frank to begin with, and it still, it smells to high heaven. And I would hope this board will do the right thing, and we can tweak it and allow for the fees, which obviously we have to have in place. But this part of creating an exemption when state law currently does not give that ability. And it does seem like it's a conflict. Now, I understand, I've been on the banking end of it. It's been a few years, but I understand the process that as a bank that they have to go through for the audit team. I've been there. But from the AMC's perspective, they are doing it, is it to the bank's policy? And there's a lot of stuff that came out in Dodd-Frank that even if they find things, and if you as an appraiser have issues, right or wrong, who do you go to? Because the appraiser's going to be on the front end of this every time. And when you've got an agent of your client, when you have an issue, if you're coming back and we're exempting a class in this particular statute, how in the world do you know, and does this board know, how to act on these particular issues until it's too late? We're on a slippery slope with this.
I too am from a banking background, and I used to dread those days where an examiner would throw some things on my desk and say, explain that, federal examiner. I know that, but your point, Mr. Benson's well taken, that they would hear about bank policies. And so now, as an appraiser, I think of all the things banks have asked me to do that I would have to stop them in their tracks and say, you can't ask me to do that. That doesn't meet USPAP. That is not part of Dodd-Frank. It's not part of whatever. And if that rolls down from the bank policy to the AFC that's federally chartered, then there again is an issue. I cannot vote for this. Just not comfortable. I feel some conflict. I feel an ethical twinge about it. So that's where I stand. And I'm
What entity would need say that this needs to happen for you to feel comfortable with? I mean, because that's where staff, we feel what we're up against, is we're having our regulators say, you need to fix this. And so I'm wondering, what do you need from us? Because I think we've not put forward something that y'all are comfortable with, and I appreciate that. So, but I don't want to end up in a, non-compliant situation if we need to.
The state, for me, literally the state has already said, the state of North Carolina has said who's going to be regulated by this board. And they did it 8 years ago. The only people that it does not regulate are the lenders themselves and the direct employers of the banks. That's my take on it. And it is my opinion that the feds have acquiesced to the state, and they have told us, you guys do set up your own law. They said that in 2015, which was even after we had already put our law in place. And it does not restrict us from going further than the federal requirement. And we should continue on because we got that particular section in our books. And unless it was challenged specifically from the federal authorities, I think we've got to let it stand.
Yeah, this is a recommendation for what we send to the legislature to pass. And me personally, I would hope that this board would, because of the arguments that's been made, because I do feel that it gives a federally regulated AMC a competitive advantage, and it could stifle competition, would in turn hurt the consumer. I'd rather send the message to down Raleigh that we don't like this, and you made a comment a while ago that we can always have Raleigh push back to the feds on this. I'd rather send a message to Raleigh that we are requesting them to push back on this if this is the case.
Well, I'm a little concerned if we're the ones that are supposed to notify them that there may be an issue if we don't. Because if we just say, okay, we're not pushing anything forward, then I have no directive to tell Raleigh anything. So I'm going to be careful about, but then if they come back and say, it's your job to make sure
they
they
can be
comply.
challenged by the feds, and then Raleigh would have to take it right up. So, I would be, I'm fine.
But if I said to the regulator, you need to send a letter to Young Street, and they do that, I don't want this body mad at me because I told them that's what they need to do.
That would really be up to Jones Street at that point. And if we take this body out of the position of having to create a subgroup of a group that we're going to say we're recommending an unfair advantage to.
Are we able to ask a question from the gallery?
It's up to the chair. There was a question from the gallery, I want to know if you could ask.
If you could what?
Ask the question.
Ask the question.
Yeah, under the circumstances, I would think so. Would you like me to come to the podium or no?
Yes, please.
You may if you want to use it.
Or you can use this mic right here.
Here's all right.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Craddock, past president of NCAB. And the question I wanted to pose to you all for you to think about is, if this does get passed, what happens with the $25,000 bond that the state of North Carolina, the appraisal board, requires of AMCs? How does that protect or not protect North Carolina appraisers in the event that a federally regulated AMC, if in fact they went out of business, how would that protect the appraisers here in North Carolina? That's my question to you.
I can address that if you like. The only AMC that has to have the bond lines is one that's registered with the state. So if one of those federally regulated AMCs chooses to register, they would have to have a bond. If they don't choose to register, then there's no bond, obviously.
How do we move from here?
Well, there's a few things that you can do. If you want, I broke down the statute changes into 3 different sections, as you can see from your cover page. The first one adds that federally regulated recruitment management company language. The second adds in the ability for the board to accept the fees, and the third one is the required language for the extension that we requested. You could vote to adopt all of the changes as I've written them. You could vote to do it section by section, however you would choose. I would say that we really can't delay this till March because this does need to get to the legislature to meet the bill drafting deadlines. That will be in place before your next meeting. The other thing that you should also be aware of is that no matter what, and as Don has repeatedly told you, no matter what it is that you tell them, they will do their own research. And specifically, if they ask your legal counsel a question, she's required to respond and to do the necessary research as a member of the Attorney General's office. So she would point out to them what the federal law would say. And I think you'd find that the legislature is interested in the federal minimums and not going beyond them. At least that's what I've understood the tenor of the legislature to be over the past couple of years. Do you have questions, Vernon?
So if we don't do anything about this particular sentence that's waived for your concern about what's your, any of this regardless on or not, what is your best guess for how that would play out?
Well, my current position has been, and always has been, they never had to register in the first place. The wording that we had on page 1, paragraph C, any state or federal chartered bank, I think covered it. Anyway, so I don't believe that they ever had registered in the first place. So technically, I don't think it makes any difference. I think all I've done was to add in, make it more clear, and comply with Dodd-Frank, become in conformance with Dodd-Frank language by adding these definitions. But if you took them out, I still don't think they have to register. I don't think they would get it.
I will say that some of our initial feedback on this was, and Roberta, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the way it's worded now is actually too broad.
Yes.
In other words, they look at what this sentence would be tightening it up even closer because you get rid of the state bank issue and stuff like that. So that was our first directive, but then when we got questions on it by some of the stakeholders, we went back and specifically asked, and they said, you know, the state has no authority to register in a federally regulated agency. So I mean, and that was you know, black and white yesterday. So I mean, I'm just trying to. So I mean, I'm not. You know, my biggest thing is, I understand the discussion points. It does come up. There's so few of them nationwide that Arrow, they do talk about how do we identify them, how would we know if we have one. I mean, that keeps coming up, and yet there's two. Sometimes I hear some people think, I think there may be a third, but I've only heard 2 names. So I mean, that's kind of where we are on it. I would be fine if you want to move forward with the second 2 sections. Let us find out if, you know, if there's a strong directive that we need, that this needs to be changed. And we get it on some, you know, national regulators letterhead and send it downtown and say this is what they say. You know, but I just didn't want to take that action when it was this board's desire to take no action and me to keep my mouth shut. You know, so that's, I just want to make sure we're clear.
To follow up what Don said, we did ask our regulators, if there's a subcommittee, about the current language, and the comment was that the statute exempts any financial institutions from the definition of the AMC and includes state-regulated institutions institutions in a definition. I'm concerned these definitions exempt more in the AMCs than the AMC law exempts. It says they have to be regulated by one of the federal financial regulators. That was something I got back in October, which was why the language got changed. But, yeah, as John said, I mean, if you're not comfortable, I don't know the will of the full board, I've certainly heard from three. But if you're not comfortable adding the first part of this, we can take it out in what we send downtown. Frankly, I mean, federal law is going to trump anything that we do anyway, because it's a supremacy clause of the Constitution. And so federal law says they don't have to register, then they don't, and there's not really much that we as a board can do to force them to register or to tell them that they're doing unlicensed practice or anything along those lines, because federal law does exempt them. So we can't make them register.
Well, we would be making a statement, and we would be making it clear that we're in conflict because there's a potential conflict in my mind.
You could also, you could also use, if it would make you feel more comfortable, the exact language from the federal regulation rather than changing it, because that's specifically what's required. And I think you have that in front of you, if that would make you more comfortable. An AMC that is subsidiary owned and controlled by a financial institution regulated by a federal financial institution regulatory agency shall not be required to register with the state. And you could use that specific language, which is right from the federal regulations that exempt. If that would make you feel more comfortable, just another option.
We're coming down to, it's the idea I want you to hear. I mean, we're talking about in the weeds, and it has been the understanding of many in this room and outside this room that state law exceeded what the requirement, not necessarily what we were limited to, but we exceeded the requirement in the initial motion. And the way the strict constrictionist approach in this was that if you want to do business in North Carolina as an agency, you have to register. If you choose not to register, then you don't have the ability to do business in this state. That is the approach that was taken in the initial law. Now, if then that is outside the authority and creates overreach, it demands, at least at this point, the court's telling us that's the case. So we did not exceed our authority, my opinion, and many in the room, that in the original construction of this statute, and by doing so, we are saying, okay, we're scaling back statutorily. Most people have agreed that we have the authority to do it to begin with. And as an appraisal board, because the state initiated the statute, we're required to follow the statute, not what we think it means.
If I can respond, I actually think that this new language protects you more because it's more specific about what is exempt, whereas the language you have right now is very general and would be subject to more interpretation by a court. So that's my opinion about it.
And it's setting up, saying this person is exempt over here, which right now they don't enjoy that protection.
But state chartered banks enjoy that protection right now, correct? And if we pass this, state chartered banks do not enjoy it.
State or federal credit unions.
Yes.
So we're pulling more people under our regulation rather than fewer?
Right.
Or am I misunderstanding?
No, you're correct.
Right, yeah.
We were too broad before, now we're narrowing it.
And it protects you, and I mean that seriously. This is very specific so that you're protected in a court case even further by this specific definition, in my opinion.
Because right now, my local credit union could say that they are exempt, right?
Only a state credit union, it says here, would be exempt.
Right.
Right.
But where we pass this, it won't be exempt.
In the current language, though, that we're talking about the AMC is owned by the institution and not the institution itself.
Yeah.
And so that quite honestly is a non-issue, because those folks are using state they don't hold the charters for the AMCs. It's these federal guys that are in question.
So it says any state charter bank.
Yes.
Or-
But if the AMC is
The
a
bank-
legal entity owned by the bank, I would think that the AMC would still be subject to the rules.
And
It doesn't say it's owned by a bank, it says
this
it's
rule is the institution of the bank themselves. It has long been held that these banks do not have to adhere to the ANC policies internally. They don't even have to adhere to the appraisal stuff internally. And they're talking about the banks themselves, not the ANCs in that issue, not who they're owned by.
Well, the AMC has to be, in order to be exempt, has to be owned and controlled by an insured depository institution, and the AMC has to be regulated by the federal regulators. So you can't be a partially owned subsidiary, you have to be wholly owned. Essentially, it's the appraisal department of a bank is what you're talking about, and how they choose to operate. I think Ms. Burns is right that we're trying to narrow this down because there was concern that state banks could fit under the exception that we currently have in our statute. We can't go broader than federal law. That's the other problem. But rules are one thing, but law is another. If the statute says that the appraisal board can't regulate somebody that's regulated by the FDIC, then we can't do it. Now, and it is a practical matter, we can't force one of these companies to register. We can't tell them, you must register or you are doing unlicensed practice. I wouldn't be representing the board, but I can't imagine we'd go very far in federal court if we tried to.
John, did we receive any letters from stakeholders regarding?
I mean, we've just got some emails in the last couple of days raising what the concerns we're talking about. There's,
Anything specific that we need to hear?
I think you fleshing out the chief concern is why are we giving up what's perceived out there as our regulatory authority over these entities. I mean, I've been back and forth with Mr. Leader. I think he was going to make a comment in his remarks, and then he just sent an email saying they would like us to have this discussion where everybody could hear it. So, I mean, I didn't see anything that you haven't raised.
Be able to help us.
Right, and I don't think it changes the discussion. The question really does become, how do we move forward? We know we have these two pieces that we definitely need to fix. This one, it does appear to conflict with federal law. We can get more input, but I'm getting a little bit of feedback that even more input from the federal level is not going to satisfy the concern. So I don't know if that's even necessary, or do we just get a letter and send it with the legislation to Jones Street and let it go from there? And anybody can weigh in, obviously, on every level to their representatives as to how they think this should go forward.
Mr. Chairman, I have a basic question. Everything we're talking about goes back to the federal language. Have we ever discussed and attempted to change the federal language to eliminate our issue? The issue is accommodating a flawed federal set of rules.
So, the board does not have any authority to change the federal language. That would be up to the feds. You could write them a letter, but you don't have any authority to change federal law. The only authority you have.
I understand that. But
Is
has
that the question?
any attempt been made to protest it, even though we don't have authority to? I don't see why the board cannot protest this regulation. Dodd-Frank is just, it causes havoc throughout everything. And that's the whole thing that everybody is trying to accommodate, spending money over money over money, trying to accommodate it, instead of going back and trying to get it changed. And I was wondering whether we had ever considered such a thing, even as an entity that does not have, quote, authority to it, but we as a body have a right to protest it. Thank you.
Don, how would you help us out here? Let's say that we did basically what you said, and we move ahead. How would a motion sound if we went ahead and moved on the non-controversial issue here?
Yeah, the items on page 2 and page 2, 3, and, well, no, excuse me, page 3 and page 5. Because 2 are definitions for page 1. So,
2.6 and 2.7.
Yes.
yeah, item 2.6 and 2.7.
I would be in favor of making a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we would accept those two provisions, 2.6 and 2.7, with no required changes of the definitions in order to initiate those two subsections.
I'll second that.
So we are proposing that we vote on section 2.6 and 2.7 only. Is that correct?
Yes. With, again, the restriction of that is to keep the wording so that it requires no further changes in definitions in the other subsections. Yes.
Is there any further discussion by board members regarding this motion?
I don't have any comments. I mean, the vote is to accept 2-6 and 2-7 and not 2-2 at this time.
I have a second.
Then you have a second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the provisions of the 2.26 and 2.7 fees in particular, but not on 2.2 or any language that would affect the definitions of 2.6 and 2.7, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Discussion, please.
Oh, discussion, sorry.
I'd like a friendly amendment that we only discuss 2.6 and 2.7.
That was the.
That's essentially what we're doing.
What I was
But
presenting.
why are we throwing
So
that
leave
thing
out
in about the
2.2, yeah, leave out.
Yeah, we're leaving out 2.2. The motion is on 2.6.
2.7 only, nothing to do with 2.2. That's right.
Okay, discussion complete, everybody understand? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. What do we do next with that?
We adjourn quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can prepare some language and the staff will take care of getting it to an appropriate sponsor.
If I understand correctly, you're not going to vote on 2.2 at all, is that?
Not at this time.
That was not part of my motion. If someone else wishes to do that, they have the right to open that one up. I was going to restrict this first vote to the 2.6 and 2.7.
I'll give you a motion and I'm done.
Exhibit 11.
Yes, you have your streaming statistics provided to us from NCAB. We were informed that they had some technical difficulty with the YouTube channel, so you have for November, the viewers and view minutes for the November meeting on Facebook. And item 12, as you recall, at your November meeting, our policy managers from the appraisal subcommittee were here. Subcommittee met earlier this month and issued our report, and they had no negative findings, and we received an excellent rating. So I appreciate the board and staff assistance with that.
Exhibit 13.
Okay, you have the appraisal foundation reports. Just of note in the first page there, it talks about the appointments. In my scrambling around and not writing down my remarks about Roberta today, I forgot to mention that in this forum that Ms. Willette was, the weekend after we met last time, interviewed and appointed for a position on the Appraisal Standards Board, and I believe her first public meeting is a week from Friday. So if you want to log in and watch her debut, they live stream those now. So she is now on drafting USPAP, so that ought to be fun. So and speaking of USPAP, you have the exposure draft. There's a third exposure draft out. It's in connection with that public meeting on February 8th. If you have any comments, if you send them to the subcommittee, the standards board, I think Roberta will confirm they read them all. So, and then there's an announcement asking for any interested parties to apply for membership as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Appraisal Foundation. So if anybody is interested in that, tell you how to do that. And see if I can pull up my staff report real quickly. I'm tired of talking about the technical issues, but I think we're getting closer to a path forward. So, we did meet with another software provider about the database issue. However, I think Mindy would agree, we were not comfortable that they were able to convey a clear path forward as to how they would make this work. I did mention we had an issue with our current provider where he wasn't available. Well, that has been cleared up, and we did just talk with him again, and he proposes that we move forward with an online solution to get payments for course fees, temporary practice fees, and renewal payments. It would probably look at a timeline of getting the course fees and temporary practice up and running, make sure that we have that ability to we don't have any problems with the reception of fees and people using credit cards, etc. And then hopefully have the renewals be able to be done for 2020. And for those of you who haven't been around long enough you've been appraisers long enough to know that this year, 2019, is a big CE year. So it's not the best time to implement a major change. So hopefully we can move this forward. So he is in the process of putting us together a proposal to do these items, and then get the next phase would be to upgrade our SQL server database in the next calendar year, and move our current, what is now an Access database, to a cloud-based system. And that would at least get us to a platform that if we wanted to do something bigger and better with another company, we would be in a position to migrate a whole lot easier than we are now. I really feel like if we get that far along, we can probably make the corrections or changes we want to do going forward with the same company. But we may, I think the hang-ups we keep having are trying to move from this old system to a new. I would, if we can get moving forward, I will contact the necessary committees. I believe in it. Right now, the long-range planning and finance would be necessary if we need to move forward on something prior to March, and then I would let the whole board know, and if we needed to take an electronic vote to be confirmed in March to get started, because I don't want to keep delaying this. I want to make sure we're in a position to have renewals going in 2020 online, because I think we're getting a lot of flack for that. So, and rightly so. I don't want to make that sound like I have a problem with it. But that is our, in talking, as you know, we've been working with NCAB. They've seen the issues, they've been watching this for a while now, and they agree this is a good path forward. So that is, that's what we're looking at. Other activities of the staff, Mr. Davison observed a class on manufactured housing on December 13th, held by Bright Path. And this, of course, I believe included a tour of a manufacturing facility. So that was kind of a novel concept for a course. Our investigators, as I mentioned, have begun doing audits of trainees, and we'll be doing more of those. And as I said, I might be bringing you something very soon about a possibility of doing a evaluation of logs on an interim basis. And the staff will also be doing more audits of continuing education courses during the peak time leading up to renewals. I have to attend the TAFAC meeting in Washington this Thursday and Friday. Mr. Lewis and I will be speaking at a seminar hosted by the NC Department of Revenue on February 18th. If you recall, Roberta and I were supposed to attend this event, but it was delayed due to one of the hurricanes that came through. And the Aero Spring Conference is in Denver, May 3rd through 5th. So travel days on either side of that. And there is a new regulator training on May the 2nd. And I've reached out to our newest 3 members to see if they would be interested in going to that, and also Ms. Panico. So I'll try to get, well, actually I do have registrations for all of you. So if anybody else would be interested, I know some of you gentlemen have been around 5, 6, 7 years probably. But if Ms. Burnham, if you were interested, just let me know, and I'll see if I can get one more registration. So, and so that's what I have for staff report.
Let me ask you a question that came up. I really never considered, completely off topic.
Okay.
Why did the board ever adopt a policy that open forum could not address items on the agenda for that particular meeting?
Because
time factor?
Well, the idea was behind the open forum, and Roberta knows more about it, that the idea was to bring concepts to the board for future review. And then it became more of a thing of, you know, now we want to address issues that are right current. I'll be honest, a lot of public meetings I've gone to, they put the forum at the end. And that way you don't run into issues of, I don't mind that we get feedback. I think we just need a way of, you know, getting a feedback dump the day before the meeting doesn't work too good. So we need to figure out how to manage that.
You're sending the agenda out to stakeholders,
Right.
and they have obviously on May, it seems to me appropriate, but that's not my personal opinion.
And I don't have a problem with the forum being used for that. I think what I would want to see is maybe look at, let's set, okay, when the deadline for the agenda, send the agenda to the stakeholders,
Right.
and then we will give them, you know, a certain amount of time within when it went out to ask to speak.
Right.
Because you get people, you know, the day before and there's no, you know, maybe something we need to be able to address. So I would just say that maybe we will look at it. I've talked to Sandra already about it a little bit, and but that's how it got where it is.
It's just a policy, right?
I mean, you adopted, as you may know, we had it was just kind of a very open-ended thing and had very little interest in it, quite frankly, over the years. Just every once in a while, I think the gentleman came on us to adopt the measuring standard or what. But I mean, there were, you know, a few things that came up over the years. But here lately, again, because we have a lot of issues that are interested stakeholders and they're before the board right now, you have that coming up as a, you know, wanting to discuss it. So how do we handle that in the meeting? You know, I know when Ms. Troy did the training for new board, she said, you know, boards do not have to afford people this. You know, there's no requirement to that. So setting some policy as to how it's done is certainly within the board's purview.
Personally, if we have a topic that has two sides to it, I'd like to hear all sides.
And I don't think anybody wants to not give people the chance to voice their opinion. I don't see that with anybody. So it's just how we make that work that we can get information to you, and if it is something that needs to be in front of you, that, you know, that there's an orderly way to do that.
Is that something staff can take a look at and consider variations of policy?
Sure, and then we make some recommendations, and y'all can, I know like last time we discussed when the actual deadline was, and I mean, even when we brought the policy forward, it was kicked around as the, you know, right now it's basically the day before, 24 hours before.
And we can't spend an hour or two with this kind of thing.
Well, and that's another thing is when do we like kind of have a cutoff if we're gonna, let's say if we get something out there that's a hot button item and all of a sudden, you know, as you know, when we do rules or anything like that, we have a public hearing and people can come. But just for the forum, what's gonna be the normal, you know, we're going to have a window of up to, you know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, you know, whatever, and first come, first serve, or, you know, as you understand what all the dynamics are, so we would just need to look at that.
If you could, just toss that around a bit and see what seems feasible.
Have you completed the staff report?
That is it.
I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Motion is second to go into closed session, which we shall do at this time.